We're fully into the swing of the 2019 election cycle, and there is no doubt that there's a lot of economic activity in the air, from media spending to allegations of vote buying rife in the air. My name is Isabella Akinseye, and welcome to Politico Politica.
The Nigeria of the future is for dreamers like me.
I belong to everybody and I belong to nobody.
Our local government areas must become special economic zones.
I hope to disrupt the politics of failure.
There will be no sacred cow.
Dissolve all the congresses, dissolve the convention, and start all over again.
Mr. President, my people are under siege.
Leadership is not about the position you hold.
You can't shut down your shop and be chasing criminals.
If you allow criminals, there will be no shop.
Find ways to fix your judiciary.
That's what say I.
And most importantly, fix the mind of the people.
The party must do what is right.
Nigeria suffers from a state of economic radiculopathy, social sciatica, and political dystopia.
Welcome back to Politico Politica with me, your host, Isabella Akinseye. Let's meet our guest. He is the founder and CEO of Sogato Strategies LLC, a global strategy, risk, and macroeconomic advisory firm. He was educated at the London School of Economics and Political Science, PhD, MPhil, the Fletcher School at Tufts University, MA, University of Nigeria, Nsukka, LLB, and the Institute of Risk Management in London, the United Kingdom. As Deputy Governor of the Central Bank of Nigeria from 2009 to 2014, he led the execution of extensive reforms in the Nigerian banking system after the global financial crisis. As Professor of International Business and Public Policy at the Fletcher School of Law and Diplomacy at Tufts University in Massachusetts, he has taught, trained, and inspired graduate students from more than 40 countries. He has worked for 17 years at the United Nations. He is a visionary thinker and thought leader. He's the author of several books and an international keynote speaker. He is the presidential candidate of Young Progressive Party. He is Professor Kingsley Moghalu. Professor Moghalu, welcome to Politico Politica.
Thank you.
So we'll go straight into our topic of the day. I want to look at the economics of politics. What's the relationship between economics and politics?
There is a subject called political economy in which I am an expert. And that deals with the interrelationship between political and institutional interests and how the market, how those interests affect the markets, how they affect the economy, and vice versa. But more importantly, in Nigeria and in many developing countries, it's the politics first. If you don't get the politics right, it's difficult to get the economy right, which is why I decided to not be content with being a political economist, but to become a political leader, so that I can bring vision, political vision, to the organization of state institutions, so that our markets can actually become, our economy can function better.
So the politics drives the economics. Yes. But can you separate the two? Can you do one without the other?
No, you can't. You can't, because even if you are just a trader in a market, you're not interested with in the politicians, you have no interactions with them. The policies they set at the top or don't set affect your own livelihood down there. The foreign exchange situation, you can call it an economic situation, but it is also a political situation in terms of how should we manage our foreign exchange. If a president says, even though the central bank is independent, but the president says that he wants the exchange rate fixed, and the central bank decides to surrender its influence and listen to the president and fix the foreign exchange rate. That's what happened in Nigeria in 2015, and that's a very major reason why Nigeria went into recession.
So now let's bring this home to political season. Yes. The economics of politics.
Yes.
How prudent have our political leaders and politicians seeking elective office been in their spending to get into elective office?
Not prudent at all. I mean, the waste involved in the economics of politics in Nigeria. That is the economics of of how to win elections is humongous. First of all, Nigeria is a poverty-stricken country. Our politicians have no agenda. The recycled old politicians have not had any real transformational agenda in this country other than to just keep perpetuating themselves in power. And because the people are poor, and the people are poor because of the failure of the political leadership to create a sound economy, they exploit the people's poverty by buying their votes, you know, trying to rig elections through vote buying. So again, what we have in this country is not really politics. It's politics as a business. In more advanced countries, the politics is about philosophy, it's about ideology. So when people are contesting for power, it is a contest of ideas. It's a contest of beliefs about how the democracy should be arranged, the role of the people, how the economy should be arranged, not in Nigeria. And this is actually the first election, and partly because of the entry of people like me in politics, that we are moving more now towards an issues-based type of discussion, which people like me have forced into the political arena. So what we have is a political industrial complex where you have the owners of Nigeria PLC who think that they and their children own this country. And they just bribe everybody, win elections, and recycle themselves every 4 years. Now, what happens, for example, is that they will tell you that it will take you not less than 50 billion naira to win the presidency, right? But the truth they will not tell you is that 40 billion of that 50 billion will end up in the private pockets of many of the party bigwigs or the campaign chiefs. And maybe only 10 billion will be actually spent. So this is why there is an illusion that it's going to cost you the whole world to be able to win an election. I'm not saying that politics is not expensive. It is expensive. Just the logistics alone, moving around, costs a lot of money. The advertising costs a lot of money. But those are legitimate expenses. So if it was just there, it's still expensive enough. But on top of it, the people who now make a business out of politics, who make a living out of politics, that's where we have the problem in this country. And that's where the economics of politics goes wrong.
So do you see this politics being characterized by economics, by Naira and Kobo? Do you see it changing? Because you mentioned spending to get into office, but you spend in office and you spend to return back to office. So that spending just seems to continue forever. Do you see that changing and really moving to a politics that focuses less on the economics?
One of the consequences of the kind of politics we have now is, of course, that when the politicians spend so much to buy votes, immediately they go and spend so much just to win elections. Immediately they go into office, their first priority is to recover their losses. This feeds corruption. Inflated contracts, direct stealing from the treasury, all these things. So that's why I'm running for president. Because, and there are a lot of other new generation kind of candidates running for president, and most of us are running on the basis of ideas or visions. I have a very clear vision for this country, which I took the time to write out in a book called Build, Innovate, and Grow, My Vision for Nigeria. And I'm the only presidential candidate who has done this. And that shows that before I came out, I thought through Nigeria's problems of nation building, economic management, leadership and governance, foreign affairs, and offered my visions, then identifying the problem and offering the solution. That's what I have done. And I hope that as we go into future elections, it will be based more and more on competing visions of the economy and the political space than on the competition of financial resources.
So how have you been able to fund all of this?
Good question. It's been a combination of a lot of Nigerians who support my vision, donating and contributing to my campaign, and my own personal resources, which I've spent sacrificially.
Thank you, Professor Moghalu.
You're welcome.
We'll be going on a quick break on Politico Politica, but before then, we'd like to hear from you on our topic of the day, the economics of politics. Use the hashtag Politico Politica, tweet at PP with Isabella. On Facebook and Instagram, the handle to follow is Politico Politica. The show returns shortly. Join us again.
Politico Politica. Politics for everyone.
Welcome back to Politico Politica with me, your host, Isabella Akinseye. It's now time for our Politics and More segment. So this is a segment where you get to share with us your political journey. So when did your romance with politics start?
Quite recently, actually. After my time as a deputy governor at the central bank, I spent 5 years in that role. I became a professor in the United States, teaching international business and economic policy. Now, being a professor gave me now the distance and the freedom to look at Nigeria from a much more independent standpoint rather than being part of an institution. And I began to see how bad the situation in Nigeria has become, the increasing poverty, and the failure of governance, especially from a government that we had very high hopes for in 2015 when they came into office. This disappointment about the failure of the recycled old politicians led me to decide, plus of course a lot of pressure from young people, especially from the northern part of the country. A lot of young people, you can see my personal assistant is from Yobe State. He was one of many people, young northerners, who were asking me to really run for the presidency of this country. And so I considered it very carefully and I decided, look, why not? It is time Nigeria was led by a competent, technocratically competent vision. It is time Nigeria was led by somebody who is properly educated. It's time Nigeria was led by someone who's globally exposed. It's time Nigeria is led by somebody who has a real plan for the economy and who understands how the economy should be managed.
So now let's move to party politics.
Sure.
The Young Progressives Party, YPP.
Yes. Yes.
What about their ideologies sits with your value system?
Absolutely. I joined the YPP. First of all, when I announced that I was running for president, I deliberately did not announce my political party. It was part of my strategy because I wanted to build, I knew that I had a bit of a brand as a personality that is known as a technocrat in Nigeria in the economic sphere, that is known as somebody who's had an experience in international diplomacy. And so I wanted to build that brand into a potent political brand of an alternative to the old order. And so I refrained from announcing membership of a party. What this meant was that many parties were courting me to align myself with them and be their candidate. So,
any of the major political parties, APC, PDP?
Of course. Of course. I mean, they were courting me to come into them, but in the case of the APC and the PDP, they would never have made me the presidential candidate because both of them practice political apartheid, zoning. So they were mooting the possibility of being the vice president. I wasn't running for vice president, I was running for president. So I didn't want to go and play a second fiddle because my vision is my vision and you cannot trust anybody else to execute that vision. And if you're under that person's authority, why must the person execute your vision? And if you're qualified, as I am, as we see in Nigeria, a number of times the vice presidents are more qualified than the presidents. I didn't want to be part of that, trajectory. So I decided eventually so I made a decision that, of course, I'm going to join a new political party because you cannot be a new wine in old wineskin and hope to be effective. So there was no question for me of joining the APC or the PDP. I also knew the implications of that decision, that the road would be much harder because the people have been intimidated, held captive by these two parties for many years. So breaking through was not necessarily going to be an easy thing, but I could sense that the people were tired of these two parties, but they were just waiting to see whether there was somebody around whom they can gather to force them out. So people are tired of the recycled politicians, but do they necessarily have the courage to vote them out? This was what I felt my candidacy would test. So eventually I decided to join the YPP. I joined the YPP because the YPP is an ideologically driven group of young men and women. They are progressive, which is to say, we want a better society that is more egalitarian, a society that puts the citizen, enthrones the citizen as the sole focus of governance. That's what in YPP we are looking at. We don't believe in the politics of greed. We believe in service to the people. So we're more of a societal transformation-oriented party. And so that's why I joined the YPP. And so far, so good. From nowhere politically a year ago, the YPP and my candidacy is now the third force in Nigerian politics, the alternative, or the third most, I would say at this point, perhaps popular party after those two.
So speaking about the political third force, do you think Nigerians are ready for the political third force as it is now, which is so many parties, or do you think Nigerians are waiting for the political third force to come together and present one candidate, one party, and really stand up to the major political parties?
But you know, that is a matter of political dynamics. It's not a must that must happen. It's a democracy. You can't force people to come together if, for whatever reasons, right or wrong, they don't want to come together. For example, some people may be motivated more by the idea of being an also ran for president. I ran for president, it's on my CV, but they know they have no real chance of winning. While you would say that that is not right, but because they're free as citizens, you cannot force them into a coalition. You know, some people feel that because they are young, that is what being president requires. Being young is very good, but it's not enough. You must be young and experienced and competent enough to be president of a big country like Nigeria. And that's the space where someone like me, you know, occupies. I'm a young person in the context of Nigerian politics, but I'm a very experienced person with a track record that can be verified nationally and internationally. And that is very relevant to what being a president of Nigeria requires, which is the ability to build a nation, the ability to manage Nigeria's economy, the ability to manage Nigeria's foreign affairs. And building a nation means, of course, things like establishing, in my own vision, establishing a national ambition and a national philosophy that will make Nigeria a real nation rather than just a country that it is today. I think that nation building requires things like my commitment to constitutional restructuring of Nigeria. It requires effective national security. It requires working with women as equal partners. It requires working with the youth as leaders, leaders of today, not just of tomorrow.
And you have a chance to speak more about your plans and your vision for Nigeria on our next segment, which is our Project Nigeria segment, but still on the politics and more segment. The political third force, do you think a lot of them are entering 2019 to test the waters and come back, regroup, and come back stronger in 2023? Or do you think a lot of them believe that they can actually win?
I really don't know. Some of them believe they can win. Some of them know they cannot win, but they're driven by some passion and commitment to the country, and they want to make a statement, you know, so they want to help to change the narrative, you know. And then there are people who just have it on their paper as a CV. So it's a group of...
What about the people that are broker of politics? So they're going to come third so that they can give their votes to the first or the second, and then on themselves, they abrogate power to themselves as a decider.
That's also part of political strategy. I mean, there may be people who have that type of strategy. For me, for example, and the YPP, we're in this to win. We plan to win the elections in February. We have a strategy to do so. We've taken ourselves from nowhere to third place right now. After the two big parties, we are moving to overtake the two of them and beat them at the ballot box on February 16. Don't forget, a lot of people will say, is this possible? Yes, it is. It is possible if all the people in Nigeria who feel that Kingsley Moghalu will make an excellent president actually vote for him.
Well, do these people vote?
That's the question. That's the question. I mean, if you have a PVC and you actually decide to vote, if you're a member of the middle class, for example, and on the day of voting, you actually come out and vote instead of boarding a plane to London and crowding the airport lounges at Heathrow Airport to watch the results from London or the US, then you're not serious. But if you say enough is enough, it's time for us to have a competent leadership, I will stay and add my one vote. Hundreds of thousands and millions of that my one vote can produce a president different from the APC or the PDP. And so that's why I talk about courage. I have had the courage to run. It's risky to run for presidency in this country. especially when you're a serious candidate like I am, and you're affecting the public the way I am, you know, so you're risking life and limb. So if people then think that you are good enough to be president, then they should have the courage of voting along the lines of their conviction. That's what I'm saying. And if they all do, you might be surprised at the outcome. Because I know what happened in the United States in 2016. We all thought we were walking to the coronation of Hillary Clinton as president. People went to bed and woke up and Trump was the president. It was a shock. It's one of the biggest shocks I've seen personally in my life, politically. Emmanuel Macron, the same thing. Even Barack Obama, when he came out in America, many people felt a black man couldn't be a president, but he was not afflicted with doubt. The same way that I'm not afflicted by doubts. I'm moving ahead, consistent, pushing ahead. And we're seeing results already. And we will be consistent. We will not rest on our oars until we get to the ballot box. And hopefully a lot of citizens, even many of them at the last minute, will turn and say, that's the man. We're putting our thumbprint for him.
Thank you, Professor Moghalu.
You're welcome.
We'll be going on a quick break on Politico Politica, but when the show returns, it's straight into our Project Nigeria segment. It promises to be a very interesting and engaging discussion. Stay with us.
Politico Politica. Politics for everyone.
Welcome back to Politico Politica with me, your host, Isabella Akinseye. It's time for our Project Nigeria segment. So you've been a lecturer, so yes, you know about projects. So let's look at Nigeria as a project. As a project, yes. How will you rate this project in terms of the work that has been put into the project? So maybe the finished work doesn't get an A1, but the work itself, how will you rate this project?
The work that has been put into Nigeria as a project is below pass mark. It's below pass mark because it's one thing to talk about a good country or a good Nigeria. It's another thing to do the things that create a good country. Our leaders and many of our citizens have not walked the talk of what should create a better Nigeria. And that's why I'm running for president, because I have a vision to make Nigeria actually work. But I know that unless someone like me has the authority to provide that type of leadership, if the wrong people have the authority, we're going nowhere. They can talk and talk, but when they get in there, you see, you can't grow left-handed in old age. And that's why I say we must retire our old recycled politicians, because they have nothing to offer.
You've gone around the country, you've been engaging at the grassroots. What are the problems? What are the challenges that Nigerians are screaming about, that are desperately hoping for solutions, and how will you go about solving them? Yes,
very good. The challenges that many Nigerians are screaming about are challenges like, I don't believe in this country anymore. This country is hopeless. There's no hope. This is not one country. Why don't we just split the damn thing up and all go our separate ways? You understand what I'm saying? So there's a challenge at the core of nationhood. And I think that this is the most important challenge we face as a country. We are not a nation. We need to be built into being a nation. And that requires certain things which our politicians don't have. And you cannot give what you do not have. One of which is a philosophical, foundational worldview of the Nigerian state. Because if you look at every country that has made progress, they have it. The Americans believe in the shining city in a hill, God's own country, land of the free, home of the brave. You see what I'm saying? They have all these ideas of nationhood, that they are special. You know, the Chinese have their own worldview, which is why they have been able to rise over 40 years and now become the second power in the world. So that sense of foundational and philosophical ambition for a country, a nation, is what my presidency will bring to Nigeria. We've never had it since after independence. So I want to say this because it is very fashionable to talk about physical things. You know, I need a road here, I need a bridge here. Of course, I'll do those things. It's my job.
What about restructuring? Do you think
that's what I'm talking about? You see, so restructuring is one of the foundational ways that we will arrive at a nationhood and a nation that works. So I'm going to be leading the process of a constitutional restructuring for Nigeria. So thank you for mentioning that, because I was coming to that. You know, if you don't have that sense of nationhood, it's also difficult to ensure effective national security, you know, because, you know, and then, you know, so there are many problems. But if you bring good leadership to it, and there's something else I'm going to bring on top of a foundational approach to solving Nigeria's problems. Mind you, I will not in 4 years solve all of Nigeria's problems. Any presidential candidate that tells you that he will, is deceiving you. You know, let's be realistic. But I will lay a foundation. I will address some low-hanging fruit, but I will lay a foundation that will be, and restructuring is core and critical to that foundation, from which is going to be difficult for any other leader to depart. You see what I'm saying? And that sets the country on the path to move forward.
So you will steer the ship in the direction it should go. But
yes.
Let's look at the economic potential of Nigeria.
Absolutely.
Nigeria is a very blessed country in terms of natural and human and mineral resources.
Absolutely.
How will you unlock her potential?
Very good. I will unlock our potential by explaining to Nigerians that the wealth of nations is never built on natural resources. That's the fundamental mistake we've been making with economic management in this country for the past 40 years. We have come to worship the God of small things. The God of small things is things like the oil price. Every morning, the politicians are watching the price of oil, whether it's up or down, their heart is in their stomach. If it goes up, they say, yay, the budget, we can work. If it goes down, oh, they carry their hand, because they don't have the intellect. I have it. So I understand that human capital is the real wealth of nations. I understand that every society that is prosperous practices what is called economic complexity. You must produce complex economic products with value added into them, and you must export those products. For you to do that, you need something that is called productive knowledge, PK. Look, I'm a professor, this is what I teach. You know, so I can tell you in my sleep, and I've been a deputy governor of the central bank. So if you put me in Aso Rock, from day one, I know what to do about the economy, you know. So we need you need that productive knowledge and the skills base, you see what I'm saying, which calls for educational reform, which calls for what I'm going to do as a low-hanging fruit immediately. Within the first year, we will establish skills training centers across the 774 local government areas of this country, so that young people coming out of secondary schools or university can go and acquire a skill that makes them competitive. You are either more easily employed, or you can more easily employ yourself. You see what I'm saying? Then we're going to establish a 1 trillion naira venture capital fund, which will invest in new businesses by millions of people in this country who today do not have jobs. You know, and that 1 trillion will come 500 billion from the government, 500 billion from the private sector. It's going to be run by the private sector so that there's no mago-mago in it. And I think it will be, but we'll set targets for them, including social inclusion targets, like investing in businesses owned by women, for example.
So security, how
Yes.
will you make sure that the life of the Nigerian still has value?
Absolutely.
How will you protect our borders?
Absolutely. Now, security, my approach to security as president will be, first of all, a better understanding of what national security means. Boko Haram is important, but Boko Haram in itself and alone is not the beginning and end of national security. But this government has treated it like that. And because of that, a lot of other national security problems like the herdsmen, you know, like the banditry in Zamfara and many other parts of Nigeria today have risen massively. So we have to have a better understanding of what national security means. It means Boko Haram, it means herdsmen, banditry, it means cyber security, the security of our computer systems. It means the poverty problem in Nigeria is a fundamental national security threat. If you have your population rising, unemployment rising, and poverty rising, you're setting up a time bomb. So we need a more sophisticated understanding of national security. Then I will appoint a national security architecture that is professionally competent. Right now, the professional architecture, security architecture, is headed on the basis of parochial sentiments. 99% of them are from one part of the country and one religion. That tells you that it's not you and I they're interested in securing. They're interested in securing the regime in power today.
That point that you make, do you feel it affects your chances of winning at the polls, being from a particular geographic zone or a particular religion? Or do you think you have that worked out with your vice presidential candidate?
Well, of course, my vice presidential candidate is a young woman who comes from the north. She's a Muslim. So it's an inclusive ticket. But the real reason why it will not affect me is that I have a vision that rises above these small things. Remember, I talked about the God of small things. I don't worship it. So that's why I've been able to come as far as I have come and draw the following that we have been able to draw since February. Because you're selling people a very different kind of vision that they've never had. And it's appealing to them. They know that this is better. And you're getting that response across all the ethnic boundaries, across all the religions, because they're grateful to see a politician not talking about tribe and religion and, but telling them about how to improve their lives. Do you see what I'm saying? So there's a vested, an enlightened self-interest for them, even in my vision. Do you see the point? So people think it's impossible to achieve these things, but I have been a practitioner of leadership, for many, many years. And I believe I have a natural ability to lead in a transformational manner. I will be the president of Nigeria that will be like Lee Kuan Yew in Singapore, that will be like Mahathir Mohamad in Malaysia, that will be like Deng Xiaoping in China. And practically speaking, let me tell you how we will achieve some of these things. In my office of the president, there will be 4 important units. There will be the Office of National Strategy. There will be the Office of Performance Management. There will be the Office of Risk Management. And there will be the Office of Human Capital Development. So what do these 4 offices do? The Strategy Office will develop the big picture ambition with time frames, milestones, and what part of the government must achieve this by year 1, year 2, year 3. Then the Office of Risk Management will help me to manage the risks that can prevent us from achieving these strategic ambitions. And those risks can be many. They can be political risk. You start pandering to political interests and you deviate from the vision you've set out. It could be strategic risk, like worshiping the god of the oil price, the small things, and you find out that your economy depends on the vagaries of the oil price. Or it can be operational risk, like the civil service may not be effective, which is why we have the Office of Human Capital Development that will help to reform the civil service. So the Office of Performance Management will now be like the monitoring spirit. They will be helping me monitor every department of government against the strategic milestones that have been set out in the big strategy frame. So if by 6 months or 1 year, this department is not achieving this, which now has a consequence on this, they will come to me with a report. I'm going to call the minister. Why not? If you don't give me a good explanation, you're fired.
Thank you, Professor Moghalu, for your contributions on our Project Nigeria segment.
Thank you. We will run Nigeria like a project with project management.
Politico Politica. Politics for everyone.
Welcome back to Politico Politica with me, your host, Isabella Akinseye. Let's turn things up on a lighter note. It is the Quickfire segment. Are you ready, Professor Moghalu?
Sure. You want me to start dancing?
No.
I can dance. I like to dance.
Number one, the first female governor will emerge in the next elections. True or false?
I hope so.
So that's true?
I hope so.
Number 2, the party that will dominate in 2019 is?
The YPP.
Number 3, young people have what it takes to be leaders because?
Because they have vision and because they have passion and because some of them have the competence.
Number 4, the funniest thing I've read about myself online?
No, my shaku shaku dance.
Is it bae? Is good?
Well, I tried my best.
Number 5, the candidates I am most afraid of?
None.
Number 6, Nigerians will vote with their stomach or their brain?
I hope they will vote with their brain and their heart.
And number 7, if not you, who?
If not me, then of course, whoever the people decide. I bow down to the will of the people. I'm a Democrat. So, but I hope it will be me.
Thank you, Professor Moghalu.
You're very welcome.
We'll be going on a quick break on Politico Politica, where we share with you what's happening on the political landscape. And when the show returns, it's our final word segment. Enjoy.
Politico Politica. Politics for everyone.
INEC is bringing the permanent voter card PVC close to you for collection. As from the 16th to 21st of January 2019, including Saturdays and Sundays, PVCs can be collected at the wards and registration area, 9 a.m. to 3 p.m. daily. Thereafter, the collection will be at INEC LGA offices until February 8, 2019, which will be the last day. Collect your PVC today. Remember, no PVC, no voting. This message is brought to you from the Independent National Electoral Commission, INEC.
Politico Politica. Politics for everyone.
Welcome back to Politico Politica with me, your host, Isabella Akinseye. We'll be wrapping up this episode with our final word segment. So, Professor Moghalu, imagine you have your final breath.
Yes.
And you have your final words to deliver, and you have the ears, the eyes of millions of Nigerians, and indeed the world. What will you say to them? And say that to your camera.
I will say to Nigerians as my last word, 2019 is more than just an election. It is an election of our destiny. It is a choice between the past and the future, and our future. And I can tell you that that future is best guaranteed by a presidential candidate like myself on the platform of the YPP. A candidate that has a vision to build a nation, transform our economy, and break the back of poverty. A candidate that will restore Nigeria's standing in the world. You need competence, vision, experience. I have all that, and I hope that you will see that and vote for me, vote for the YPP in the elections next month.
Thank you, Professor Moghalu, for being our guest on Politico Politica, and we wish you the best with your campaigns and in the elections.
Thank you. Thank you very much.
Wrapping up this episode of Politico Politica, I'm Isabella Akinseye, reminding you that politics is not just for the old, it's for the young, it is for everyone. So play a part and stay woke.